There is a tiredness that does not come from work, but from being responsible for everyone else's emotions. It's a deep, cellular exhaustion, and one day it leads to a silence. Not the angry, punishing silence you may have used before, as a desperate plea to be heard. This is different. This is a final silence. It descends quietly. There is no grand declaration, no final explosive argument. It's the simple, heavy act of putting down a weight you didn't even realize you were carrying until it was gone. You stop explaining. You stop justifying. You stop sending the morning text to check the temperature of their mood. Your phone, once a source of anxiety and anticipation, becomes just an object again. And in that quiet, two things happen at once. A part of you feels a terrifying, unfamiliar peace. The constant hum of another person's needs inside your head finally goes quiet. But another part of you is gripped by a cold wave of guilt. A voice, which sounds suspiciously like theirs, whispers, "You are being cruel. You are being cold. You are abandoning them." They may even say it to you directly, if they can find a way past your new walls. They will call your self-preservation selfishness. They will call your boundary a punishment. They will look at the calm on your face and name it coldness. And because you have spent a lifetime being the warm one, the understanding one, the one who fixes things, you are terrified that they might be right. This is the most dangerous moment. This is the moment the empath, after years of emotional labor, stands at a crossroads. One path leads back to the familiar, draining cycle. The other path, shrouded in guilt and uncertainty, leads into a wilderness you have never allowed yourself to explore, the landscape of your own self. The final silence is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of everything. It is the painful, necessary birth of a boundary. And as the psychologist Carl Jung would suggest, the first raw, trembling step towards individuation. To understand the power of this silence, we first have to look at the noise that came before it. For the empath caught in a manipulative or narcissistic dynamic, life is not their own. Your emotional energy is not a resource for your own growth and joy. It is a utility for someone else. You are the unpaid emotional manager, the crisis negotiator, the eternal validator, the human shock absorber. Your day begins not with the question, "What do I need?" but with, "What mood are they in?" You learn to read the subtle shifts in their tone, the cadence of their footsteps, the pauses in their texts. Your nervous system is permanently tuned to their frequency, constantly scanning for threats, for disapproval, for the next impending storm that you will be expected to calm. You become a master translator of their silence, their moods, their unspoken demands. You tell yourself this is love. You tell yourself this is what a good, caring person does. This is the persona you have built, the mask of the endlessly patient and understanding one. Carl Jung called the persona the social mask we wear, the face we present to the world. For the empath, this mask is not just a social convenience, it is a full-time job. It is a role you play with Oscar-worthy dedication. The rescuer, the healer, the only one who truly understands them. And this role requires you to perform a kind of psychic split. You take all of your own needs, your need for rest, for reciprocity, for stability, for simple peace, and you lock them away in a small, dark room inside yourself. You learn to survive on the crumbs of their approval. A good day is a day without a fight. A great day is when they offer a moment of kindness, which feels like a downpour in a desert, and it gives you just enough hope to keep going. You explain and over-explain your own feelings, hoping that this time they will finally understand. You moderate your own reactions so as not to set them off. You walk on eggshells that you yourself have laid. You apologize for things that are not your fault. You carry the blame for their outbursts, their unhappiness, their failures. You absorb their chaos and call it empathy. But it is not empathy, it is enmeshment. It is a fusion where the boundary between your emotional state and theirs has dissolved. You feel their anxiety in your own stomach. You feel their anger as a tension in your own shoulders. You are no longer one person in a relationship with another. You are an extension of their emotional regulation system. And any system under that much constant strain is destined to break. This is not the surface story. The surface story is that you were too sensitive or that they were difficult. The deeper truth is that a fundamental psychological contract was established, often unconsciously. Your self-abandonment in exchange for their presence. You agreed to be the container for their unmanaged emotions, and in return, you were allowed to stay. You were needed. And for someone with a deep-seated fear of abandonment, being needed can feel deceptively like being loved. The final silence comes when the cost of this contract becomes too high. It comes when your body starts to rebel. It shows up as chronic fatigue, as anxiety that has no name, as a profound sense of emptiness, even when you are with them. It comes when you realize that you are pouring everything you have into a cracked vessel, and nothing is ever enough. You could pour the entire ocean of your love into them, and it would still drain away, leaving them just as empty and you completely dry. The final silence is not a decision made in the mind. It is a verdict handed down by the soul. It is your deepest self, your unconscious, finally screaming, "No more." It is the body, the spirit, the entire organism refusing to participate in its own destruction any longer. It is an act of survival, disguised as an act of withdrawal. When this silence falls, the dynamic does not just change, it shatters. The other person, the one who relied on your energy to feel stable, to feel powerful, to feel seen, suddenly finds their supply cut off. The mirror you held up to them, reflecting back the image of themselves they wanted to see, is suddenly taken away. And all they are left with is their own emptiness. Their reaction is predictable. It follows a script. First, there may be confusion, or attempts to lure you back with charm or feigned concern. "Are you okay? You've been so quiet." This is a test, to see if the old buttons still work. When that fails, it often escalates to anger and accusation. This is where the word cold comes in. You've become so cold, I don't even know who you are anymore. This is a crucial piece of psychological manipulation, whether conscious or not. They are attempting to project their own internal coldness, their own lack of empathy, onto you. They are taking the discomfort they feel from the absence of your warmth and blaming you for it. They are essentially saying, "Your refusal to set yourself on fire to keep me warm is an act of aggression." And because the empath's identity is so wrapped up in the persona of being the warm one, this accusation strikes at the very core of your being. The guilt that follows is immense. It feels like a physical sickness. This is the activation of what Jungian psychology might call a complex, a cluster of emotionally charged thoughts and memories. It could be a good person complex, where your self-worth is entirely dependent on being perceived as kind and helpful. Or it could be an abandonment complex, where the act of setting a boundary triggers a deep, primal fear that you will now be the one who is alone and unloved. This guilt is the ghost of the old dynamic. It is the echo of every time you were made to feel responsible for their happiness. It is the chain of the old role, rattling and trying to pull you back. The most radical act of self-love you can perform in this moment is to feel that guilt, to allow it to be there, and to not act on it. It is to understand that guilt is not always an indicator of wrongdoing. Sometimes, guilt is simply the sound of a cage door creaking open. It is the feeling of a new freedom that your nervous system has not yet learned to trust. And here, we must speak of coldness. The coldness they accuse you of is, in reality, the beginning of your nervous system's regulation. When you are in a constant state of hypervigilance, your body is flooded with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. You are in a low-grade, chronic state of fight, flight, or freeze. When you finally withdraw from the source of that stress, your system begins to calm down. This calmness can feel foreign. It can feel like numbness, or detachment, or coldness. It is the stillness after a hurricane. The world is a wreck, but the wind has stopped screaming. You are not cold, you are quiet. You are not cruel, you are conserving what little energy you have left. You are not unfeeling. You are finally beginning to feel where their pain ends and your own begins. This distinction is the cornerstone of your recovery. You must relabel what is happening. Their accusation, "You are cold." The truth, "My nervous system is finally at peace." Their accusation, "You are selfish." The truth, "I am finally attending to my own needs." Their accusation, "You are punishing me." The truth, "I am protecting myself." This is where Carl Jung's concept of the shadow becomes your greatest ally. The shadow is the part of our unconscious mind that contains everything we repress and deny about ourselves. For the good empath, the shadow is not necessarily filled with monstrous things. It is filled with perfectly healthy, normal human qualities that were deemed unacceptable in the context of your role. Your shadow contains your anger, the righteous anger at being taken for granted, the fury at being emotionally manipulated. Your shadow contains your right to say no, a simple, complete no, without apology or explanation. Your shadow contains your desire for your own life, your own dreams, your own space. It holds your fierce, primal instinct for self-preservation. For years, you have kept this shadow locked away. You have projected all the good qualities onto yourself: kindness, patience, forgiveness, and often projected the bad ones onto the other person: selfishness, anger, neediness. The final silence is the moment the shadow breaks out of its prison. It is not coming to destroy you, it is coming to save you. The silence is the language of your shadow. It is saying everything you could not say with words. It is saying, I will no longer participate in my own erasure. It is saying, my energy is mine. It is saying, I am done. Integrating the shadow does not mean becoming a cruel or angry person. It means becoming a whole person. It means acknowledging that you have a right to your anger. It means learning to use your no as a sacred tool of self-care. It means understanding that true kindness is not possible without boundaries, because kindness without boundaries is just self-harm. If this idea resonates with you, the feeling of being called cold simply for protecting your own inner warmth, take a moment. You don't need to write it for anyone else, but acknowledge it for yourself. The boundary you set was not an attack. It was an act of profound self-respect. Let's return to the symbol of the locked room. For years, you lived in a house where you were only allowed in the service quarters. You were the cook, the cleaner, the emotional janitor. You kept the main rooms of the house, which belonged to the other person, perfectly tidy. Meanwhile, the door to your own room, the room that contained your own soul, was locked. You may have even forgotten it was there. The final silence is the moment you stop cleaning their rooms and turn to face that locked door. The guilt you feel is the fear of what you will find inside. You are afraid it will be empty. You are afraid it will be a mess. You are afraid that the person you are, without the role of caretaker, is not enough. When you find the key and open that door, it is often overwhelming at first. The room is dark, it's dusty, it's filled with the ghosts of abandoned hobbies, unfulfilled dreams, and silenced feelings. The anger is there, sitting in a corner like a coiled snake. The grief is there, a heavy blanket of sorrow covering everything. Your inner child might be in there, huddled and afraid. This is the work, the real work. It's not about watching your phone, waiting for them to apologize. It's not about crafting the perfect, witty comeback. The work is to step into that room, open the curtains, and begin to tend to your own inner world. It is to sit with the anger until it tells you where your boundaries were violated. It is to hold the grief until it washes you clean. It is to reassure your inner child that you are here now, and you will never abandon them again. This is what Carl Jung called the process of individuation. It is the journey from being a fragmented role player to becoming a whole, integrated self. The persona of the good empath was just one fragment. The repressed shadow was another. Individuation is the process of bringing all these parts together, of creating a conscious relationship between the ego and the unconscious. In simpler terms, it's about becoming your own person, truly. It's about detaching your sense of worth from someone else's approval. It's about building an internal source of validation, an inner spine of self-respect. The boundary, your final silence, is the sacred container required for this alchemical work. You cannot heal in the same environment that made you sick. You cannot find yourself while you are still tethered to the person who demanded you lose yourself. The silence creates a space, a vacuum, a holy emptiness. And into this emptiness, your true self can begin to emerge. This process is not linear. There will be days when the guilt comes back with a vengeance. There will be days when you are flooded with nostalgia for the good times, which your mind will conveniently edit to remove all the pain. There will be moments of intense loneliness where you are tempted to break the silence, just to feel a connection, even a toxic one. In these moments, you must remember the exhaustion. You must remember the feeling of being invisible, of your needs not mattering. You must remember the cold dread of waiting for the next emotional storm. You must anchor yourself in the truth of why you went silent in the first place. It was not a choice, it was a necessity. The dynamic with a narcissistic or deeply manipulative personality is often misunderstood as a battle between two people. It is not. It is a battle within the empath. It is the battle between their persona, which wants to be good and loved at any cost, and their shadow, which wants to survive. The final silence is the moment the shadow wins, and thank God it does. Because as you continue on this path, something remarkable begins to happen. The energy you used to pour into managing them starts to flow back into you. You might start sleeping better. The chronic tension in your body might begin to ease. You might find yourself interested in things you had long forgotten, a creative project, a friendship you let wither, a simple walk in nature. You begin to hear your own voice again. At first, it's a whisper. It tells you what you want for breakfast. It tells you that you'd rather stay in than go to that party. It tells you that a certain song makes you happy. You learn to listen to these small whispers, and in doing so, you rebuild trust with yourself. Your definition of empathy also begins to change. You realize that true empathy is not about absorbing another's pain, but about witnessing it with compassion while holding your own center. You learn that you can be a kind person without being a doormat. You discover that the most compassionate thing you can do for someone who refuses to manage their own emotions is to stop doing it for them. Your withdrawal is not a punishment. It is the only catalyst that might force them to finally face themselves, though whether they do or not is no longer your responsibility. The ultimate goal of this journey is not to become cold or hard. It is to develop what can be called wise compassion. It is to have a heart that is open, but a boundary that is firm. It is to be able to say, I see that you are in pain, and I am sorry for that, but I cannot fix it for you. It is not my job. What happens if they try to come back? This is the final exam. They may return after a period of time, often when they sense you are truly moving on. They may come back with promises of change, with profound apologies, with a performance of deep remorse. The old you would have melted. The old you, starved for this very validation, would have opened the door immediately. But the individuating you, the you that has been sitting in your own room, tending to your own soul, will respond differently. You will not be swayed by words, because you have learned to trust actions. You will not be swayed by their proclaimed love, because you now understand the difference between being loved and being used. You will feel a strange sense of calm detachment. You will look at them, not with hatred, but with a kind of sad clarity. You see the pattern. You see the emptiness behind the performance, and you will hold the boundary. You will keep the door closed, not with anger, but with a quiet, unshakable peace, because your peace is now more valuable to you than their presence. Your wholeness is no longer up for negotiation. The final silence of the empath is a world-changing event because it changes your world. It is a declaration that the old way of being is over. It is the end of self-abandonment. It is the painful, terrifying, and glorious beginning of your own life. It is the moment you stop waiting for someone else to give you permission to exist, and you give it to yourself. The silence is not empty. It is a space of becoming. It is the fertile ground where you finally plant the seeds of your own garden, for your own nourishment, for your own beauty. You are not cold. You have simply stopped being on fire for everyone else. You are now learning to be a quiet, steady light for yourself. And from that light, a new, more authentic, and truly powerful life can finally begin. My kindness no longer requires my self-betrayal. This realization, that your kindness does not require your self-betrayal, is not just a thought. It is a seismic shift that begins in the soul and must ripple its way out through the body. For years, your body has been a silent soldier on a battlefield you didn't even know you were fighting on. It has been braced for impact, marinated in stress hormones, its muscles coiled in a state of permanent readiness. This is the layer of body memory, and it often has the longest memory of all. As the silence deepens and the external threat recedes, your body doesn't immediately relax. At first, it may do the opposite. This is the great paradox of healing from chronic stress. The moment you are finally safe is often the moment you feel the worst. The nervous system, so long stuck in a high-alert, sympathetic state, begins to tentatively shift into the parasympathetic state of rest and digest. This shift can feel like a collapse. You might experience profound exhaustion, a tiredness that sleep doesn't seem to touch. There can be unexplained aches and pains as muscles that have been clenched for a decade finally begin to release their grip. You might find yourself suddenly bursting into tears while washing the dishes, not out of sadness for the other person, but from a deep, wordless grief for yourself, for the years you lost. Some people experience shaking or trembling, as the body literally shakes off the stored traumatic energy. This is the thaw. Like a frozen river breaking up in the spring, it is a messy, chaotic, and noisy process. It is your body's way of speaking the truth it was forced to hold in silence. It is processing the backlog of every swallowed retort, every suppressed tear, every moment of fear you had to pretend you didn't feel. Trust this process. Your body is not breaking down. It is breaking free. It is unlearning the language of hypervigilance and remembering its native tongue of peace. You must give it the same patience and compassion you once gave so freely to others. As your body finds its new equilibrium, other, more subtle signs of your inner transformation begin to appear. Your intuition, which was once a blaring alarm system screaming, "Danger!" starts to modulate. It becomes less of a threat detector and more of a compass. It no longer just warns you away from what is wrong. It begins to gently pull you toward what is right for you. It's the quiet nudge to take a different route home, where you discover a park you never knew existed. It's the sudden urge to message an old friend who, it turns out, was just thinking of you. You learn to distinguish the frequency of anxiety from the frequency of authentic inner knowing. Another profound inner sign is a growing capacity for solitude. The loneliness that once felt like a terrifying void, a punishment for your silence, begins to transform. It slowly morphs into a cherished solitude. You discover that being alone is no longer synonymous with being abandoned. It is an opportunity to hear yourself think, to feel your own feelings without them being contaminated by someone else's. The silence of your home, once deafening, becomes peaceful, then restorative, then creative. You fill it not with noise, but with your own presence. You become good company for yourself. This is a sign that the individuation process is taking root. You are shifting from a state of external referencing, constantly looking outside of yourself for validation, safety, and identity, to a state of internal referencing. The critical voice in your head, which was often an echo of your manipulator's voice, begins to lose its power. You start to notice it, to question it, and eventually, to replace it with a voice that is kinder, wiser, and sounds more like you. You are, in essence, reparenting yourself, providing the steady, unconditional acceptance you never received. And then comes the advanced exam. The universe, having seen you pass the initial test of holding your boundary with the original person, will often send a pop quiz. This may not be the narcissist returning, but someone new. A new colleague, a new friend, a new romantic interest. They might be charming, intelligent, and shower you with attention. On the surface, it looks wonderful. But the new you perceives things differently. Your finely tuned empathic senses, which were once a vulnerability, have now become a diagnostic tool. You notice the little things. You notice that after a 2-hour conversation with them, you feel strangely drained, even though it was pleasant. You notice how they subtly steer every conversation back to themselves. You notice the slight flicker of annoyance in their eyes when you state a boundary, no matter how small. I can't talk right now, but I can call you tomorrow. The old you would have ignored these signs. You would have told yourself you were being too critical, too sensitive. You would have given them the benefit of the doubt, and then another, and another, until you were once again enmeshed. But the individuating you does not. You don't create a drama. You don't announce a new boundary. You simply observe. You feel the information in your body, the slight tightening in your chest, the subtle feeling of being energetically prodded. And you act on that information with quiet grace. You become a little less available. You keep your conversations shorter. You don't offer to help them with their problems. You simply, cleanly, and without malice, disengage. You don't need to label them a narcissist. You only need to recognize that they are not for you. This is the mastery. This is wisdom in action. This newfound strength comes from the most misunderstood part of this journey, the integration of your shadow. As Jung taught, the shadow contains not just our negative traits, but also our unrealized potential. For the empath who has lived as a professional people pleaser, the shadow is often where your greatest power lies dormant. It's not just anger and the word no. Your shadow holds your ambition, the dreams you put on a shelf because they were seen as a threat to the relationship or deemed selfish. It holds your raw, untamed creativity, the art you stopped making, the music you stopped playing. It holds your fierce life force, your connection to your own desires, your own pleasure, your own sovereign right to exist for your own sake. Integrating this shadow gold doesn't make you a selfish person. It makes you a whole person. It gives you the energy and the drive to build a life that is authentically yours, not one that is a supporting role in someone else's drama. You start that business, you write that book, you book that solo trip. You are no longer just a container for another's chaos. You become a creator of your own world. This journey, from the final silence to the integrated self, is not about hardening your heart. It is about making it wise. It is about transforming from a fragile vine, desperately clinging to another tree for a sense of life, into a tree in your own right. You spend the silent season growing deep roots into your own being, into your own values, into your own truth. Once you are firmly rooted, you can grow strong and tall. Your branches can then offer shade and shelter to others. You can interact with other trees in the forest, but you are no longer dependent on them for your survival. You are grounded in your own sovereign strength. The final silence was the winter of your soul. To an outside observer, it may have looked like an ending, a death, but it was a necessary dormancy, a time of deep, underground work. Now, you can feel the stirrings of a new spring. The life that is returning is not the frantic, anxious life of before. It is quieter, slower, and infinitely more real. It is a life growing from your own soil, watered by your own self-respect, reaching for a sun of your own choosing. The silence was never empty. It was the sacred space you needed to finally meet yourself. It was the quiet you needed to hear your own soul's whisper. It was not an act of cruelty, but the ultimate act of devotion. Devotion to the life that was waiting for you all along. You have walked a long and difficult path through the noise of others, but now, finally, you are walking yourself home. And the peace you find there is a peace that can never be taken from you again, because it was built by you, for you. It is the sound of your own, true life beginning.